I'm going to do my best to try to look in the camera because it kind of throws me off. I have a feeling there's probably some people, they're middle aged like myself, that may be going through a hard time now, especially with the job market being like it is. And I wanted to give you all my take, or at least my experience now, on trying to do, what essentially is a career pivot. I have decided to, at 50 years old, I'll be 50 in January, to become an electrician's apprentice. Now, I think a lot of people will probably be shocked by that, or like, bruh, you took a long time to get to that place. You're kind of, you kind of missed this, what happened to 30 years ago by doing this, but I do have to say, most of my life has been spent working jobs. I went to school for a while. Unfortunately, I majored in alcoholism, which I was top of my class in, but you can imagine that didn't translate well into the real world. So when I did get into the real world, I worked a lot of, with no degree, I worked a lot of client support, customer service, call center type stuff. Did everything from managers to leads to escalations. You know the story. The world doesn't pay a lot. It did pay a lot when I first started in that industry, if you want to call it that, in that career. But then over time, of course, it became, I don't know if it just became saturated. Of course, you had a lot of outsourcing, that sort of thing. So those call centers, that type of work, the client support, really began to lose any sort of real prominence. So I decided that after so many years now, that I would try to go a different route. Now, this all happened really because of circumstances. I think a lot of us are my age have probably maybe been pushed out of the workforce. Lots of government jobs, that sort of thing. I had a government contract 4 or 5 months ago, which was ended, with all the different changes coming in, change of administration, priorities, all that stuff. I'll call it what it is. I'll call it that for now. It hasn't been easy, of course. It has been it's been an unstable road. But I thought for myself, with the whole AI taking over and having the hardest time at my age, I'm still, sad to say, I'm doing I'm looking for entry-level work because I don't have that degree. Just something that I had started, like I said, but then it became, I wasn't really able to focus probably like I should have in that instance. And by the time I was able, I had student loans, this sort of thing. So people may, some of y'all may identify with that, but with everything going on, I just made the decision for myself, like I've got to pivot. I've got to figure out something else to do that will bring me an actual, that'll, for one, be a possibly stable career. And don't get me wrong, I know AI and robots, this sort of thing, are getting, I'm not naive enough to think that at some point in time, technology won't become advanced enough to where it is taking those trade jobs. But for the meantime, I think that if nothing else, I might have a couple of years left. A couple of years left in the tank, as well as maybe a couple of years before these robots start taking over. Young people as well, anybody that's going into the trades, it may be a good investment, a good chance to take. Because, essentially you may be looking at least, I think maybe 5-6 years, maybe 10 years, luckily, that the trades are something that can't fully be taken over by AI. More than likely it will, but I wanted to at least take the chance on becoming someone who knows a trade. If you can imagine, like in the tech support world and lots of desk work, I did some remote during COVID, did a lot of remote during COVID. You can imagine that if you've done that over the course of time, you really aren't necessarily good, or I wasn't necessarily very good with my hands. It wasn't like, something that I did very often. The money was good enough to where I was at least, making, good enough money to where I could hire people. But over the course of time, I began to realize, especially, once the jobs started drying up, and it was obvious that this was a field that looks like it was going to be taken over more and more by AI and by, automation. I just kind of got to the place I'm like, well, I have a son, I have my 15, 16-year-old son now, and he needs to learn how to do things. And I mean, being that age, it's not to say I haven't given him as many life skills as I can, given him understanding the relationship with God, and hopefully further that and to stay hopefully committed to that. I'm trying to teach him in those ways. But I also want to impart to him how to actually do things, how to actually create things, fix things, make something tangible. And I thought, well, this would be a good opportunity for me to go a different direction, learn skills, work with my hands, and hopefully that translates over to my child that he wants to. If best case scenario, I would hope that maybe he wants to go into the trades for himself. Now, he's 16, so he's got these ideas of, as all of them do, of being influencers and content creators and just not doing the 9-to-5 thing. Great and all, but the reality is, as far as what I can see for my future for the future generations, my son and his offspring, the Z's and the alphas and eventually the betas or whatever, I see that there's going to be a lot less, and they're going to have to do more with less. Sad to say, boomers, my generation, we have kind of in my opinion, allowed a lot of things to go on that have really taken away a lot of what our future generations aspire to. I think we haven't helped. We haven't helped to put them in a good position. So I want to get back to this whole pivot. So apprentice electrician, this really started when I was unemployed. There was a program called WIOA, Work Initiative. People probably heard of it. It's called WIOA. But anyway, the WIOA program basically is just to try to retrain a workforce so you can get viable employment that won't disappear, at least to upscale, to up your skills so you can be an asset to companies and have the ability to move on to real careers. So that's where this came from. This is during unemployment. This is something that they provide to you, or at least it's an option to you. That I learned about a program through the WIOA that allows for people to work, become apprentices, right? So you learn while you work. You have classes 4 hours per week. You learn about the ins and outs. You learn about the concepts of electrical and so forth. So I decided, okay, well, let's go ahead and get enrolled in it. Did that first workshop. And of course, I will say probably one of the first things that you'll probably already understand or probably recognize as an older person, that you're going to be in there with a lot of young people. I mean, you're talking about 18 to 20 somethings, maybe early 30s, but more than likely you're talking about folks fresh out of high school, didn't necessarily go to college. Like I said, teenagers, early 20s. In many occasions, in many aspects, these young people, they know a lot more about hand tools and doing things with their hands than even I did. A lot of them coming in, they're familiar with this. They had, parents. I didn't have my father in my life, so there's not a lot of time that I had to do certain things with my hands. So, and of course, that's translated over to my son, unfortunately, since he's doesn't know how to do anything necessarily with his hands. And so that I'm hoping to change. That I've already started really changing with him as I dip my toes into this world. I digress. One thing you're gonna have is a lot of humility. You're gonna have to be real humble, because more than likely a lot of the lessons that you're gonna receive as far as, doing the trade, using your tools, so forth, it's gonna come from some younger kid. It's gonna come from a kid. And so you really have to be prepared for that. You also have to be prepared, aside from them teaching you things, you also have to be prepared to learn from them and to be able to take orders from a young person. It just is what it is. For me, I think it was easier. It was almost like, here's a young person teaching me the things that a father should have taught me. It may sound strange, but of course, they talk about, we older people bring the wisdom, and when we start in this profession so late, right? Or even the journeymen that have been doing this for years, that are at the place where they're about to retire, they talk about the wisdom that older people bring to the table for the young people that are coming up in the skill and the trade. I would like to think that I'm bringing, as a 50-year-old man, bringing some wisdom to these young people. And I guess maybe in some ways I am, as far as life experience is concerned. But when it comes to like the concepts and really doing the task and using tools, that sort of thing, I was kind of, like I said, I was needing to be taught. So as I'm being taught, as I'm learning to actually do the basics of using a hammer drill and taking out your climbs to cut conduit and MC and learning these techniques, I'm becoming more and more confident in doing it. So therefore, once I become confident, then I guess that life experience begins to come out. You're able to talk to these young guys a bit easier and to share more of your experience with them. But there's that learning curve, and that learning curve, one's got to be very, you've got to be humble. That's all I can say. You're going to have to be humble in the midst of learning the trade from a young person. There's journeymen that are going to be, decades younger than you, and being able to be teachable is a big deal. Now, I'm going to get into, the cost. Tools were a bit expensive. I'd have to say that I've spent about $600 of my own money, $500 to $600, just getting into the basics of having my tools. I'm not going to put tools in here now. This is kind of a journey. I may keep this going if people have any interest in it, if older people have any interest in it. But I may show you my tools and kind of, what things I have that would be helpful to the trade. And actually, through the program, as I said, it's like 4 hours of classes that you take per week. They also get you in contact or get you linked up with a good contractor, so you can get that real world hands-on experience. And I do have to say, there's some caveats here. There's some learning curves in that too, as far as contractors are concerned. And I'll say this, as far as being a black man, an older black man at that, you already come to the table. You're much older than probably than most of the new young cats that are coming up and learning the trade. And you're also probably around the same age, or I'm around the same age as these journeymen who have been doing this for decades themselves, right? So there's another learning curve in how you're going to be treated. And that's something that I think is pretty important here. As I said, being an older, middle-aged black man, you do have to understand that you're going to be going into what is not a world, from what I've seen, I'm in Texas, but from what I've seen, is not a world that is represented in any real large percentage by black people, by black men. I would say that there is definitely going to be a much lower representation of black men, but a much higher representation of white males and Hispanic, white and Hispanic tradesmen. So that is something that I had to really figure out, that I'm going to have to, or that I've had to figure out over the course of this, is that it's something that I'm really going to have to navigate kind of, carefully. And I say that because I think that there is a stigma around Black men in general and what they can do in a construction site, and how, sad to say, how active we are if we're not not to be lazy. You don't have this black guy that's being lazy on the site and this kind of thing. And I know that sounds, that's a generalization that nobody wants to hear, but when you're working around, what I found just in my experience is that when you're working around a lot of Hispanic people and, a group of white people, more so Hispanic, that you find that you're kind of being a bit isolated, kind of dismissed. And that is something that is hard to take. From, like I said, this has been a short period of my experience. Like I said, I've been on this recent contract for about a month, and it is something that is a hard pill to swallow. And my thought to this is that they're not going to stop me. I'm going to continue going. This is not something that as far as a roadblock, this is a push through sort of thing. And my hope is that as I gain more experience, as these folks see that, look, he ain't going nowhere. He wants to stay in this trade. He's learning more about the relationships, some of the biases that comes with this. And as I begin to learn more about the industry, who I'm dealing with in the industry, my thought is that maybe I'll be able to kind of break that glass ceiling, race ceiling, whatever you want to call it. But I do have to say that's something that one would have to, especially as a Black man. And Black men, if you're interested or thinking about going to this career path, it's something that I definitely want you all to be aware of, that you're going to be coming against. And I think a lot of us are familiar with kind of working with, in the construction world, with Hispanics. Some of us, I should say, are familiar with working with Hispanic people in the construction world. Very talented. Like, for example, I have a very talented older Hispanic man, a little older than me, brilliant guy. He is a journeyman, might as well be a master. I think he was just a journeyman. He's just a journeyman at the time, but he easily could be a master if he wanted to be. But there was a level of dismissiveness from him, and not really feeling like, outside of the younger people, that I was someone who could do the job. It's funny that he's in the same age range, and he was in the same age range, a little bit older than me, and he I think he had that stigma. He had that idea. Of course, I'm asking lots of questions. I may be asking questions again, and I think as an older person, you have to understand that is going to be, my experience at least, is that was a bit of a roadblock. Is that if you're asking a lot of questions as an older person, that I think it comes off differently. For me, at least, it came off differently than it did with the younger people. Situation now, unfortunately, that they let me go from this contract. They tend to, the program at least allows you to go into different contracts. And my hope now is that I'll be able to gather, to get into another one. I'll let y'all know how things go. Hopefully I keep these videos going, kind of give you all a journey with me as to the path of Journeyman as an old guy. But I wanted to put this out there. I just wanted to encourage anyone who is up in age, in your 50s, 40s, late 40s, 50s, late 50s, maybe even 60s, I don't know, depending upon how much it can take, the toll it takes on your body. Now, that's something else too. Just before I should be winding this up, but I also did want to say that that it is a taxing job. Probably the most satisfying, strangely enough, the most satisfying work I've done in a long time compared to desk, being at a desk sitting in a chair. That much I'll say, but it is very taxing. Ladders, heat, lots of really trying to make sure that you're as accurate as you can be in the midst of possibly being in pain, possibly being drained. Lots of squatting, and if you got bad knees, you'll have to. And I do have some. I have some knee problems eventually. Every once in a while. So those are things that have to be taken into account. How's your body gonna? How you gonna recover? As I started doing this job, like I said, it's only been a month, but as I started, the days have gone on. I have found myself becoming more acclimated to this. That my body kind of knows what you're going to deal with. Lots of water is necessary. Please, if you decide to do this, I've had my own experience when I started first day. I thought that I was going to, I'm fine. I'm going to do fine. A little bit of water is good here. No, you better make sure that you're drinking water constantly. Gatorade. Make sure you have those electrolytes in your body. I had a situation in which I started seeing, I started having a heat stroke. And it's weird, think about how I've never had really a real heat stroke before, but it plays on your eyes more than anything. Like you literally can't see. Everything seems so bright. I didn't think that this is how a heat stroke hit me, at least. Thankfully I did not, pass out or anything like that, but it's definitely a huge priority is to have fluids in the body. Just wanted to put that out there too, that this is physical work. This is not going to be something that is easy at all. But like I said, in my opinion, it's probably the most satisfying thing that I've ever done. My hope is that I'll be able to continue, that those biases will go away. I do feel like they said, I do feel like I have that wisdom. I am still at that learning curve. I'm still getting to the place where I'm learning more about the concepts. Heck, even being on point with my tape measuring, right? Using laser measurements, bending conduit. These are things that you should probably look into for sure, because there's going to be some real learning curves there. Ampage, wattage, those types of things. Those are definitions that have to be that I think are easier than for me than necessarily fractions and measurements and that sort of thing. So, like I said, that's my experience. But I just wanted to put this out there. If you're interested in more of my journey, as being an old apprentice, then place comments. If you want to subscribe, great. But more than anything, hey, it's just a journey to Journeyman for an old guy. And if you want to walk through it with me, you can. But that's just wanted to put that out there. Take care.